a deal to keep the government open. Lawmakers move forward with a bill to avoid a second partial shutdown. A year after the Parkland school shooting, we'll break down the findings of a new study on how to keep schools safe and a look at the final fight of ISIS on the front lines in Syria. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Congress votes to push forward with a bill to avoid a second shutdown. Thanks for joining Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he has spoken to the president and he will sign the bill when it hits his desk.
For more, we go to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, what's the latest?
That's right, John. We are hearing that once this bill passes both the House and Senate and heads to the president's desk, the president will sign it. And we're also hearing from Majority Leader Mitch McConnell that the president has indicated to him he will declare a national emergency at the same time as he signs this bill to find the funds, the extra funds to build the border wall, since the bill only calls for about 50 miles of border wall to be built, while the president wanted to see about 200. Now, I spoke with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy earlier today about what he thinks about this compromise plan and the president declaring this national emergency to find a way to build the wall. Take a look at what he said.
I mean, this president works very hard at keeping his promises, and this is one of his biggest. I think we'll get it done, because when you look at this, with Nancy Pelosi saying only $1 for the wall, now we're getting about $1.4 billion, and we'll get the rest. They were going to eliminate ICE. No, we got more money from them. They're going to eliminate beds. Not able to do that. I think this is not a 100% victory, but it's a 1-2 step that we can finish the job completely.
Tell me about this Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act and where it stands in the House.
If a child is born alive, you got to do every medical possible to save it. So if they're trying to have an abortion and the baby survives, you've got to save that life. This is after the birth of the child. I asked for unanimous consent to bring that bill up to save those lives. And the Democrats have objected. We're going to ask every single day, and then we'll start a discharge petition to make sure to bring this bill forward. We have to save. These children are born alive, and they want to have this baby die. That is wrong. And this should not be a partisan issue. Everybody should be able to support this. We are going to make sure we work as hard as possible. This is too important of an issue. And that's why we need the help of other people to join with us to make sure we can save the life of these children.
Yeah. Now, this issue seems a little different than just the ordinary pro-life, pro-choice argument. Is this something that Republicans plan to make a big part of the campaign in 2020?
I wish we wouldn't have to. Who would think? It's really not about abortion. It's a child born alive, a survivor. Why wouldn't you use what you have medically to save that child or make that child's life continue? You wouldn't think in America today or anywhere in the world that you would have to say any protections. But we do need to, because of the recent action that happened in New York, what the Virginia governor had talked about. He actually said a baby born alive and setting it aside to pass. And then in New Mexico, they're talking about it as well.
And speaking of 2020, what is the Republican strategy for taking back the majority in the next 2 years?
When I sit back and look at what this new Democrat majority is doing, one, holding us back from born alive protection, two, this new Green Deal, which would eliminate cars, you'd have to remodel every house, every building. It'd eliminate millions of jobs. And then you look at they want to raise taxes. I mean, it's not what I think the American public was looking for. And that's why I think we're just straightforward, honest about what we're able to achieve, listen to the voters, and put out a very clear agenda.
Yeah. What do you make of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar's recent comments that seem to go against the Democrat Party's historically pro-Israel stance?
I think it's a changing Democratic Party. When you talk to many of the new Democrat members, they don't even call themselves Democrats. They're now the new Democrat Socialist Party. And this is the younger, more aggressive, and this is what's taking over the Democratic Party.
Now, as far as President Trump declaring that national emergency to find the funds to build the wall, Democrats have indicated they will quickly file legal action and challenge his use of getting those funds to build this wall. So that's certainly the next thing to look out for, because it could block the president from being able to access nearly $10 billion in that emergency fund for the wall building for months, if not years. So that's something we'll be staying on top of. Back to you, John and Jenna.
That's Abigail Robertson reporting on Capitol Hill. Well, as Abby just reported, the president's prepared to sign the funding bill.
When he signs it, he says he also plans to declare a national emergency on the border. For more, White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn. Ben?
Well, John and Jenna, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders confirmed, yes, President Trump will sign the spending bill, as Abigail was just talking about, but also to declare a national emergency. It was no doubt a very busy day here at the White House here behind me as staffers combed through more than 1,000 pages. Yes, there were bumps in the road, but in the end, the president gave it the green light.
It's going to take time. Our idea here is to look at the fine print. We are encouraged of the fact that Speaker Pelosi had said that we were not even going to get $1 for the wall, and it looks like they've put in about $1.4 billion.
Now, that $1.4 billion Mercedes was just talking about will provide fencing and other barriers for 55 miles along the southern border. That's a fraction of the 200 miles Trump has been insisting on. While his staff looks through the details, today he held a conference call with faith leaders, letting them know the White House is fighting for the unborn.
The conference call had about 4,500 leaders on the call. It was, he spoke about just the horrors of late-term abortion in particular, wanted to give them the motivation and the strength to keep fighting, to keep moving, like he called it, the pro-life movement, that this is a moment in time where we need to make sure that their voices, our voices, are heard in this fight to ensure that we don't go, that our country doesn't go in this extreme direction that the Democrats are taking us on the issue of abortion.
Now, why is President Trump so passionate about this issue?
The president's funny. I've had several exchanges with the president, and he has brought it up. It's for him, he really, as he said in the State of the Union, it's executing a baby. Like, he cannot fathom that a governor, the governor of Virginia, would say a baby is born and then you keep the baby comfortable and then the parents can decide whether to kill the baby or not kill the baby. It is something that is so troubling for this president, and the president wants to have his voice heard to say, this is where I stand. We support this pain-capable bill in Congress. We'd like to see movement. Of course, the Democrats are going to obstruct this process, but he wants to continue to talk about this issue, educate the American people, and as we're seeing, the polls are showing that a vast majority of Americans disagree with late-term abortions.
Mercedes, you're talking about New York's governor, about lawmakers. Does the White House think Congress can work together to pass legislation to prohibit late-term abortions?
Look, it's going to be very difficult when you have a Democrat-controlled House. And as we know, the far-left contingency of the Democratic Party, they're definitely in support of late-term abortion. So it's shocking to see that the Virginia governor would take this radical position, but it's very clear to know that the Democrats are pushing their party much further than we ever anticipated, which is that of supporting late-term abortion. So it's going to be a difficult process in Congress, but we're going to continue to fight, and we want the voices, the pro-life voices, to be heard, because being pro-life is being pro-love. It's about supporting those, being the voices for the unborn children.
A quick question about the National Prayer Breakfast. I was wondering if you could confirm or had any information about President Trump confronting Senator Chris Coons about abortion.
Well, I was not at the dinner, so I can't confirm whether that exchange happened, but I have been in the room with the president when he's spoken to surrogates, our supporters, and brought up the issue of late-term abortions and saying how disturbing the governor's position from Virginia, the Virginia governor's position is on late-term abortions, and he really wants to figure out how we can stop that in America.
Now, President Trump just signed a letter to Congress making clear that he will veto any legislation that weakens existing federal protections of innocent life. John?
Thanks, Ben. Well, the immigration debate has taken center stage as lawmakers work to avoid another shutdown. And according to a new poll, Americans are evenly divided on which political party has the right ideas on immigration, with Republicans narrowly edging out Democrats 42% to 40%. Well, Maria Praley is the Government Relations Manager of Forward U.S. and a DACA recipient, and she joins us now for more. Maria, I think just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your background, about how you got to the United States?
Yeah, so I came to the United States when I was 5 years old from Peru. And the reason why my family came here was because when my sister was young, she had been hit by a drunk driver and her right leg had to be amputated. And the medical treatment in the United States is very advanced. And also my mother felt like this would be a country where her children would be able to live up to whatever aspirations they would hold. So we moved here when I was 5 to Connecticut, and that's where I started kindergarten through high school. I went to college there. I was on the basketball team. I played the clarinet. I was a Girl Scout in Troop 207. I was really ingrained with my community, but also faced a lot of the challenges that were presented because I was undocumented.
So you never knew anything outside of being an American or living in America?
Yeah, and I still really don't. You know, I'm proud of my culture, but I haven't been to that country in 20 years.
Yeah. We've seen the battle over the border play out for a long time. How does that, given your background, how do you see all of this playing out?
It's really challenging because it's something that's been in the news for a very long period of time, and something that, for me, and for protections for DACA recipients and another community that's being impacted right now, TPS holders, like we still don't know what's going to happen. So we can continue to have all these conversations, and there's funding going around, and the president and the administration is stating different things and saying different things. But at the end of the day, like every single day, I'm waking up not knowing what my future looks like. And my current DACA expires in less than a year, on January 16th of 2020. So what happens if the program is gone by then, which the administration has stated multiple times that they will do everything in their power to get rid of this program? And what happens if we haven't passed permanent protections for Dreamers and TPS holders? Am I going to wake up in less than a year and no longer be able to work, no longer be able to drive, and be at risk for deportation? You know, there's no way to know that.
Was there that fear when you signed up to be a part of the DACA program that you potentially were putting your name on a government list where they could find you later?
There was definitely fear, but I think there's a strong community of Dreamers and allies who really encouraged me and made me feel really empowered. And I wouldn't change that. Even living under this administration and knowing that if the program was taken away, that I could be easily found and deported, I wouldn't change what the program has allowed me to do and accomplish and how it's allowed me to grow. And even though I live with this anxiety, I'm still able to work and contribute back to my community. I'm still able to drive without that fear. And my hope is that I can continue to do these things and that we can find permanent solutions for these communities.
Maria, final question. We have a little less than a minute left. This agreement to avoid the government shutdown, it did not, from what we understand, include DACA recipients. How does that make you feel, or what does that make you think that you weren't included in this negotiation?
It's tough because I think it's up to Congress and the administration to fix this issue. I think that at every single opportunity presented, Congress should work in a bipartisan manner to try to find a solution for these vulnerable communities. And they didn't this time, right? And instead what we got is a bill that's full of really bad things that are going to impact the immigrant community tremendously and be able to detain and deport more individuals. And if the program isn't around much longer, I might be one of those individuals who ends up being detained and deported. So the ball has been in Congress's court for a very long time. I think it's up to them to work in a bipartisan manner. It's up to the administration to own what they did when they repealed the DACA program and ended the TPS designations for 6 of the, I believe, 11 countries, and to provide permanent protections for these individuals who, like myself, have built a life here, a life full of memories here, and are ingrained in their community and contributing every single day.
Maria, you've given us a lot to think about. Maria Praley with Forward U.S., thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Well, turning overseas to the Middle East, the Islamic State once controlled an area the size of Great Britain across Syria and Iraq. Now they've been pushed back to barely 2 square kilometers.
And Defense Department officials say the end of the terror group's reign is only days away. CBN contributor Chuck Holton is on the front lines in Syria with a first-hand look at what is happening there.
Here in southern Syria, within sight of the Iraqi border, U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces have set the stage for the last stand of the ISIS caliphate in that country. The fighting has been brutal, and while the SDF have tried to evacuate civilians from the battle space, ISIS has thwarted those efforts by using up to 10,000 civilians as human shields. For those who do escape, however, their ordeal is far from over.
So this is the Syrian Defense Forces checkpoint about a mile from what they call the forward line of troops, the front lines against ISIS that are off that direction. They have walked to this point after getting across ISIS lines. These women are in terribly bad shape. Some of them are wounded. The children are obviously dehydrated, malnourished, and sick. And they're receiving some kind of initial treatment here. The difficulty is that they've had a problem with many of these women actually wearing suicide vests, and they had 5 blow themselves up in one day. And so it's kind of a tense situation being here. They've already been checked by some of the female SDF soldiers, but we've still got to, just be careful and hope that these women love their children enough that they're not going to do anything stupid like that.
But between the front line and the nearest refugee camp, there's nothing but more than 200 miles of arid Syrian desert. No food, water, or shelter. Into this gap is stepping a group of Christians who make it their mission to travel to front lines around the globe and help people at their point of greatest need. They are the Free Burma Rangers, and their founder, Dave Eubank, has been working on the front lines in this region since 2015.
God is sending a mighty river into Syria of his spirit to change things. And I said, we're not a river, man, we're a drop. And he said, we're all drops in God's rain, and it forms a river. And you and I may not live to see the day of change, but it's coming, because God cares about these people.
All right, we're here to rescue. A former U.S. Army Special Forces officer, Eubank has seen much of war. So have his ethnic medics, who grew up in the conflict zone in Burma and have used their skills here to save many lives. From Dave's perspective on the ground, he says pulling out of Syria would be the worst thing the U.S. can do.
The military side, they've done a great job, and they're doing a great job. They need to stay and complete that, and stay to keep this space open. But humanitarian, there's a huge gap. The humanitarian gap from the front line to, for example, the nearest hospital, 4 hours. So you could be shot up there and then take a whole day to cross, another day to get here, then 4 more hours before you get to a hospital. So what the U.S. could do, practically, is set up field hospitals to support the Syrian Democratic Forces to improve their ability to save lives.
Those who arrive here are often gravely injured, like this taxi driver whose home was hit by a bomb as he and his family were sleeping.
At 3 in the morning, our house was destroyed, and there were 23 of us inside.
Only Salam, one son, and a daughter made it out alive. But even before that tragedy, life inside the Islamic Caliphate was unbearable.
Life was terrible in there. We had to carry water from far away, and we ate grass to stay alive. ISIS wanted money to let us leave, but we had no money, and finally, they let us go.
You might think it's crazy for a group of civilians to venture so close to the front lines, but this is no ordinary missions team or a group of tourists. These are highly trained medics and lots of prior military experience here that kind of makes them uniquely qualified to do the kind of work they're doing, addressing that humanitarian gap between the front lines where people are escaping ISIS and the first refugee camps, because there really isn't anything to help those people between those 2 points.
This is what we're made to do. We like it. This is the kind of work we can do. And we're not too afraid of the front line or fighting. And we have the skills, but all of that is only useful and only workable if led by God.
These men surrendered to SDF forces from the conflict area and are suspected ISIS fighters. Be that as it may, they are sick, hungry, and some were wounded. So the FBR team gave them water and medicine, and then Eubank said a prayer.
Lord Jesus, please bless all these men. Let them call on your name. In Mosul, we lost a lot of friends. I was wounded 4 times. I lost my translator. 30 guys I knew well were killed. 3 of my team were wounded. In the face of that, why would we help them? Because God sent us, and we know I'm not perfect. Those that'll raise their hand and say, pull me out, I want to pull them out. That's redemption. That's how things change. And this is the first time I said I forgive ISIS. That's God's work in my heart. That's God's work in my heart.
From southern Syria, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
1 year later, up next, how students and the nation are marking the anniversary of the Parkland school shooting. Well, today marks the one-year anniversary of the Parkland school shooting in Southwest Florida. Students and community members came together to remember the lives of the 17 people killed at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. The Florida governor ordered flags to fly at half-staff to honor the victims. And here in Washington, lawmakers held a moment of silence on the House floor to pay their respects.
Well, after the Parkland shooting, Amy Swearer and John Malcolm of the Heritage Foundation researched and published a 3-part report on strengthening school safety. Amy joins us now for more. Thanks for being with us, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this report sheds light on how schools can combat violence. How did you go about balancing how to prevent more school violence without impeding on constitutional freedoms like the Second Amendment?
Well, I think the first thing that we tried to do was look at the scope of the actual problem. Just like with medicine, if you don't have a good handle on the symptoms and you don't have a correct diagnosis, you can't go about setting a correct course of treatment. And so the first thing we tried to do was to determine what is the scope of the problem, what's the frequency, how often is this occurring, and what are some of the common factors. Because until you've really got a handle on that, you can't go about trying to find effective solutions. So that was the first thing that we did.
Well, I mean, policy-wise, do you think that greater gun safety measures can help curb school shootings?
Well, it depends on what you mean by gun safety measures and what specific measures you're talking about. So there are certainly some proposals, and we mentioned quite a few in that paper and in subsequent papers, including some that we just recently published, that really could be effective. These tend to be targeted interventions at specific individuals, focusing on identifiable risks. And also strengthening the ability of law enforcement and the mental health community to respond to a lot of the red flags that we see that are common among individuals who perpetrate these horrific crimes. But there are, unfortunately, a number of commonly proposed gun control measures that we don't think would be very effective because they're not focused on the underlying causes, and they're not. Again, they're misdiagnosing the problem, and so it's going to be an ineffective treatment.
You mentioned the underlying cause often being mental health that goes untreated, but your report also notes that mass school shootings are extraordinarily rare and that students are safer today than they were in the last 30 years. Why does that maybe not necessarily feel that way?
Well, I think it's because these events, when they do occur, are devastating, and they hit at the heart of the nation. So they really do have this tremendous impact that you don't see with a lot of other similar types of events. So I think that's part of it, is that it feels all-encompassing because they are very emotional, and they are events that tug on our heartstrings.
Amy, moving forward, what is, as we have this discussion and this debate that's not going anywhere anytime soon, in your opinion, what needs to happen?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to happen is we all as Americans need to recognize that the safety of the public and of our school children in particular isn't an issue that belongs to the left or to the right. That's an issue that we all agree is something that is good. It is a good thing to make sure that our nation's students are safe. That being said, we need to take a harder look at the real problems and the real scope of the issue instead of just jumping to conclusions about how big the problem is and what will be effective in combating that. So we need to start focusing, again, just on those measures that are actually directed in ways that are going to be effective.
All right, Amy, thank you again for your time. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
And finally tonight, William Barr is the new Attorney General.
Senators voted to confirm President Trump's top law enforcement officer this afternoon, and he was sworn in this evening. This will be the new Attorney General's second time leading the Justice Department. He also served in the role under President George H.W. Bush.
Well, that is going to do it for Faith Nation tonight.
Have a great evening, and happy Valentine's Day.